یه عده آدم تحریک شده منصور دشمن.
We are tracking breaking developments tonight as thick plumes of black smoke are currently billowing up from the streets of downtown Tehran, signaling a major escalation. The deafening roar of anti-regime slogans continues to echo relentlessly across all 31 provinces, rocking more than 185 cities in a coordinated uprising. Intelligence analysts on the ground now estimate that more than 500 separate demonstrations have erupted simultaneously, stretching the regime's resources to the breaking point. Amidst this massive tidal wave of protests, unconfirmed but persistent reports claim that one of Supreme Leader Khamenei's private residences has been torched, fueling speculation that his iron grip on power is finally crumbling. Indeed, the footage and reports coming out of the country suggest this situation has spiraled far beyond a simple wave of civil unrest or sporadic rioting. What we are witnessing on the ground is nothing short of a low-intensity yet highly strategic urban warfare scenario being waged directly against the ruling establishment. These protesters aren't just satisfied with flooding the public squares anymore. They appear to have built a sophisticated counterintelligence network that operates with military precision. This underground grid is aggressively targeting the regime's brain trust and its frontline enforcers, turning the tables on the security apparatus. In a stunning reversal, this network is effectively weaponizing the very same tactics the regime has used to oppress its opponents for decades, but now those tactics are aimed squarely at the state. According to unverified intel coming from Reuters Press and a variety of independent sources, these resistance cells are systematically identifying high-value targets. They are tracking down the private homes of ruthless Revolutionary Guard commanders and senior officials who gave the direct orders to open fire on unarmed civilians. Once identified, they are marking the front doors of these officials. And let's be clear, this is not just some act of vandalism or graffiti. These markings serve as chilling proof that the regime's decades-long strategy of blacklisting and elimination is now blowing back on them with a vengeance. This shift in strategy appears to be leading to increasingly deadly consequences as the tension on the streets evolves from mass collective anger into specific individual reckonings. In the middle of this absolute chaos, a new threat is emerging from within the very army that Khamenei deployed to protect his throne, a development that changes everything. This internal fracture has thrown every calculation in Tehran into total disarray as the supreme leader realizes his firewall might be compromised. A video that has gone viral across social media platforms, allegedly dating back to November 2026, exposes a massive Trojan horse effect within the military ranks, indicating that desertions began months ago. The man in the video states, "I am Colonel Sajjad Azadi, a serving officer in the ground forces of the Army of the Islamic Republic of Iran." He continues with a bold declaration, "I hereby announce my official defection and complete separation from this illegitimate regime." He goes on to say, "I pledge my full allegiance to the historic lion and sun flag, which remains the only true flag of Iran and the Iranian nation." In this explosive clip, the colonel, wearing a standard-issue Iranian army uniform with a name tag reading Behzad Azadi, or Sajjad Azadi, openly condemns the regime as a lie and a hostile occupation. But the real bombshell drops when the colonel formally pledges his loyalty to the pre-revolution era symbols. He salutes the lion and sun flag of the Shah era and makes a shocking assertion that the current Islamic Republic is built entirely on lies, deception, and occupation. He warns the leadership with these words, "Great and significant events are underway that will change the course of history." Finishing his statement, he says, "I stand shoulder to shoulder with the Iranian people and fully support the call for freedom and the salvation of our homeland." According to this Iranian colonel, a staggering 50,000 high-ranking officers have secretly signed on to the National Cooperation Campaign launched by Prince Reza Pahlavi. If these numbers hold water, it means a massive chunk of the army's command structure, the Artesh, which Khamenei thought was loyal, has actually flipped to the Shah's son. This is arguably the most critical piece of intelligence we have received, as it technically explains the paralysis we are seeing on the ground. It sheds light on exactly why the regime has been almost completely unable to suppress these protests despite their usual brutality. 50,000 officers represents a massive force, more than enough to effectively lock down and neutralize an army from the inside out. Reports of army units withdrawing and refusing to intervene in places like Qasr-e-Shirin seem to corroborate these claims, matching the reality we are seeing on the map. Instead of carrying out crackdown orders, soldiers appear to be stepping aside, literally opening up lanes for the crowds and creating space for the resistance to breathe. Similarly, we are hearing claims that Iranian police in some cities are actually directing traffic to open up escape routes for protesters rather than arresting them, suggesting this national cooperation runs deep. There's growing speculation that some specific units, such as those stationed in Abadan, are operating as sleeper cells. These units are reportedly waiting silently ready to mobilize on Pahlavi's direct orders when 0 hour arrives, further deepening this mysterious fracture in the military. While these strategic retreats are happening in the open, the popular intelligence network established by the protesters is continuing to yield deadly results for the regime's enforcers. The violent events that unfolded in the Malik Shahi region of Elam province on January 3rd give us a grim look at the situation. These incidents serve as a concrete example of how the element of fear has dramatically shifted direction, now targeting those who once held the guns. Sources say that the private residence of Revolutionary Guard Colonel Mehdi Rahimi, a man held responsible for the massacre of 10 civilians, had been positively identified by protesters. Shortly after his location was leaked, it is alleged that a coordinated attack was carried out directly on Rahimi's home. Reports indicate that the colonel was killed during the ensuing clash, an incident that proves the street has activated its own brutal justice mechanism. This underscores a terrifying new reality for the regime. Instead of official investigations or trials, direct reckonings are taking place on the spot. Rumors are now circulating that a nearly identical situation played out in the holy city of Mashhad. It is alleged that Brigadier General Javad Keshavars, the commander of the Revolutionary Guard's anti-drug unit, tasked with crushing the protests, was killed in a firefight with demonstrators. These alleged executions are not just isolated acts of revenge. They are creating a massive shockwave that is shattering the confidence of the regime's entire security bureaucracy. The sudden elimination of these two top-tier commanders hasn't just rattled cages. It has sent absolute shockwaves of panic tearing through the upper echelons of the IRGC. We are talking about generals who once walked around like gods, believing they were completely untouchable, now realizing they aren't even safe behind the locked doors of their own private residences. What we are seeing here is a massive leap in intelligence gathering that proves the resistance has graduated from scattered protests to a highly sophisticated organized command structure. You can see the evidence right on social media, where detailed maps and specific home addresses are being circulated, showing a level of tactical coordination that we simply have not seen before. The regime is now backed into a corner, facing horrifying allegations that the death toll has skyrocketed, with reports suggesting anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 civilians have been slaughtered. It looks like the rule of law has been replaced by the law of retaliation. An eye for an eye, and the sheer scale of losses we have witnessed over the last 72 hours is absolutely terrifying. While chaos reigns in the streets, there is a massive internal calculation happening behind the scenes, with key power players trying to figure out which way the wind is blowing so they don't go down with the ship. The power struggle inside Tehran has just hit a critical boiling point, entering a whole new volatile phase, thanks to some shocking, unexpected maneuvers by President Masoud Pezeshkian. These aren't just political gestures. These moves are sledgehammers hitting the already widening cracks in the regime's foundation, threatening to split the entire leadership structure wide open. Now on the surface, Pezeshkian went on state television and seemingly told people to resist the unrest. But if you listen closely to the subtext, he is sending a very different coded message to the public. By doubling down on the idea that peaceful protest is a fundamental right and that the people's demands are legitimate, he is directly contradicting Supreme Leader Khamenei, who keeps branding these folks as vandals and foreign agents. Political analysts are reading this loud and clear as a calculated power play by Pezeshkian, a bold attempt to paint Khamenei into a corner and strip away his authority. He is essentially auditing for the role of the post-regime leader, trying to position himself as the guy who stood with the people when the walls started crumbling down. It is highly likely Pezeshkian knows about the estimated 50,000 Pahlavi sympathizers embedded in the army, and he is trying to pivot his strategy now before it is too late to jump from the sinking ship. This isn't just rhetoric. His statement has likely poured gasoline on the fire, fundamentally shifting the energy and dynamics of the protests playing out on the streets. We are seeing concrete examples of this, like police units in Tehran suddenly retreating from key friction points, which looks a lot like a direct response to the hesitation caused by his message. Even the police forces, who are supposed to be the regime's muscle, seem to have taken the hint from Pezeshkian and started pulling their punches, easing up on the crackdowns. Intelligence assessment suggests that these types of high-level signals are acting as a green light, emboldening those disloyal elements already hiding within the security apparatus. We might even see the unthinkable happening within the feared Basij militias, where rising dissent and outright disloyalty among the ranks are becoming a very real, very surprising scenario. Make no mistake, Pezeshkian is playing a high-stakes game of Russian roulette, but this gamble could be the catalyst that accelerates the total fragmentation of the regime. Meanwhile, the exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has officially taken the gloves off, abandoning the polite diplomatic speak for a much more aggressive, direct tone. In his latest broadcast, he signaled that the uprising has entered a militant phase, explicitly stating that government institutions inside Iran are now considered legitimate targets for the resistance. He declared that the embassies belong to the people and delivered a brutal ultimatum to Khamenei, telling him to resign now if he wants any chance of retiring in Moscow with his buddy Assad. This isn't just talk. It is a clear indication that Pahlavi is moving past opposition and is actively preparing the groundwork to assume power. That kind of bold leadership is exactly what is needed to sway that silent majority, the 50,000 sympathizers embedded in the army and police, to finally make their move. We are hearing reports that soldiers are secretly circulating Pahlavi's messages in the barracks, which is fueling a massive wave of desertions that is spilling onto the international stage. Adding to the pressure cooker, direct warnings coming from U.S. President Donald Trump and Senator Lindsey Graham have significantly ramped up the heat on Tehran. President Trump didn't mince words, drawing a hard red line by warning that if the regime continues slaughtering protesters, the U.S. will intervene, which severely limits their crackdown options. Senator Graham's promise that help is on the way is being interpreted as imminent cyber support, possibly Starlink terminals, which could fundamentally shift the balance of power on the ground. If the IRGC's cyber defenses have holes in them, that weakness creates a perfect opening for a potential U.S. intervention to dismantle their command and control. State TV tries to hype up these pro-regime rallies, but the turnout has been pathetic, with tiny crowds proving that the government has completely lost its legitimacy in the eyes of the public. When you look at the big picture after everything that has gone down, one thing is crystal clear: Iran has crossed the Rubicon, and there is absolutely no turning back now. We have got marked houses, generals getting taken out, reports of 50,000 officers ready to defect, and an entire nation chanting Pahlavi's name in the streets. The Khamenei regime hasn't just lost control of the streets, they have lost the barracks, they have lost the bureaucracy, and they have lost the ability to govern. The Iranian people heard Pezeshkian's call to make a choice, and they have responded loud and clear, setting a path that leads directly to the total elimination of this regime. So the real question isn't about when Khamenei books his flight to Moscow, but whether he can even get that plane off the tarmac before the walls close in. You have to remember, just having a pilot and a fueled-up jet isn't enough to guarantee an escape in a situation this volatile. You need secure airspace, you need a loyal air traffic control crew, and most importantly, you need to be damn sure the air defense batteries aren't going to blow you out of the sky. Right now, the math doesn't look good for Khamenei because the skies over Tehran are a dead end. The regime no longer has a monopoly on who flies and who dies. There is a bombshell allegation circulating in intelligence reports right now that is on the verge of being officially confirmed. The reports indicate that radar operators in the regular army, the Artesh, have started systematically ignoring no-fly zone orders issued by the Revolutionary Guards. Make no mistake, this technical insubordination isn't just some glitch or communication breakdown. It is deliberate. It is a silent, deadly act of rebellion that effectively slams the door shut on any escape routes for the regime's top brass. Khamenei might have a ticket to Moscow in his pocket, but it is technically worthless until he clears Iranian airspace, which is looking less likely by the minute. As we speak, the keys to that airspace are likely held by that 50,000-strong faction, whose loyalty has evaporated, leaving the supreme leader with nowhere to run. For any authoritarian ruler, the ultimate nightmare scenario is that paralyzing split second of uncertainty where they look to the sky and can't distinguish if the fighter jets screaming over the palace are there to defend the throne or to bomb it into oblivion. Right now, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei isn't just worrying about that terrifying possibility. He is living through that exact horror in real time as the ground shifts beneath him. The regime is facing a catastrophic shutdown that extends far beyond the airspace, crippling the energy pipelines that serve as the vital economic arteries, keeping the Islamic Republic on life support. While the world watches protests morph into full-blown urban warfare on the streets, the true tectonic shift that threatens to topple the regime is happening largely out of sight in the energy-rich basins of southern Iran. Breaking field reports coming out of Khuzestan and Bushehr provinces confirm that the blue-collar backbone of the nation, the oil and natural gas workers, have coordinated a massive shutoff of the valves. This isn't just a labor dispute over wages. This is a calculated insurrection disguised as a political strike designed to choke the government's resources. We are witnessing the 2026 version of the legendary oil strikes that ultimately brought down the Shah during the 1979 revolution. But this time, the devastation is exponentially more severe. Critical data indicates that pressure gauges are hitting zero in the pipelines responsible for transporting fuel from the massive Abadan refinery all the way to the capital city of Tehran. Reports that the flow of energy has completely flatlined at key junctures are being corroborated by open-source intelligence analysts who are poring over thermal satellite imagery. The refinery flares and smokestacks, which usually light up satellite feeds like Christmas trees at night, are now totally dark, signaling a complete halt in production. This blackout does more than just stop the regime from exporting crude oil to the global market and generating essential revenue. It effectively drains the tanks of the Revolutionary Guard's armored personnel carriers, the riot police's intervention trucks, and even the escape aircraft meant for the elite. We are looking at a total logistical collapse that paralyzes military projection. After all, a tank without diesel is nothing more than a 60-ton paperweight. Those imposing piles of metal, which were supposed to be the iron fist protecting the regime on the streets of Iran, are now at risk of becoming abandoned roadblocks because they literally cannot refuel. So, with the walls closing in, who is left to save Khamenei from this cascading disaster? He looks to his so-called resistance forces. However, the fires consuming Tehran have begun to irreversibly scorch the entire axis of resistance that the regime spent billions weaving across the Middle East. At this critical juncture, we have to talk about the deafening silence that mainstream media is missing, the silence that will likely drive the final nail into the regime's coffin. The frantic pledges of loyalty and support that usually pour in from Beirut, Damascus, Baghdad, and Sana'a are nowhere to be found. This vast network of proxy forces, which has been fed for years on rhetoric about the road to Jerusalem and was expected to ignite the region at Khamenei's command, is shockingly quiet, passive, even as Tehran burns. Do not mistake this lack of action for strategic patience or some master plan in the making. This is a declaration of complete logistical and financial bankruptcy, a total system failure of the proxy network. When you peel back the layers and look at this through a cold, hard, analytical lens, the reality is that this betrayal isn't ideological. It is purely a matter of economics. Running an imperial project is an expensive business, but trying to finance an empire while your own house is collapsing is mathematically impossible. Gone are the glory days when Iran's oil revenues were washed through the shadow fleet and smuggled to deputies in suitcases full of cash. Those days ended the moment the strikes hit Tehran. The massive disruption of the Iranian oil ministry's data systems didn't just cut the lights in the capital. It severed the invisible financial umbilical cord that paid the monthly salaries of fighters in Hezbollah and the Houthi movement. Scattered fragments of intelligence from the ground are whispering about a dire and desperate situation unfolding in the southern suburbs of Beirut. In the stronghold of Dahieh, reports suggest that Hezbollah militants haven't seen a full paycheck or any paycheck at all for the last 2 months. You have to remember that a militia force, no matter how much they talk about ideology, is an asymmetric structure that runs on cash, not just conviction. While Khamenei desperately scrapes together his last cash reserves to pay the elite Revolutionary Guard units protecting his own palace, his stepchildren abroad are being left to starve. And as history shows, loyalty based on a paycheck turns into anger very quickly when the money stops flowing. Sources inside Lebanon are reporting that certain factions within Hezbollah are already formulating their own exit strategies, betting on the imminent fall of their patrons in Tehran. The command structure of Hezbollah knows full well that without Khamenei's backing, they are left completely exposed and defenseless within Lebanese politics. Therefore, instead of sending reinforcements to save Tehran, they have likely switched to survival mode, hoarding their weapons and ammunition for a potential civil war or a conflict with Israel. For Khamenei, this is the absolute worst-case disaster scenario coming to life. The foreign policy structure he spent decades building as an insurance policy has effectively been canceled unilaterally because he missed the premium payments. If you look at the Iraqi front, the situation paints an even more humiliating picture for the supreme leader. Iran's grip on Iraq has always been maintained through a steady flow of cash and the projection of raw power. Now that Tehran's power is gasping for air, we are seeing militia groups in Iraq stop taking orders and start acting like local warlords. According to international media reports and deep-dive military analysis, the chain of command is disintegrating. Weapons depots and smuggling routes near the border, once controlled by the Quds Force, are now being seized as personal property by local commanders. These groups view Tehran's moment of weakness not as a tragedy, but as a golden business opportunity. They are looting Iranian assets in Iraq to fund their own operations. This isn't an alliance anymore, it's a crew raiding the lifeboats of a sinking ship. The famous Shiite crescent that Qasem Soleimani painstakingly constructed is now in tatters. It collapsed not because of a military defeat, but because of financial inadequacy and the massive power vacuum left by a dying regime. The entire centralized power structure is fracturing in real time, rapidly devolving into a state of absolute unmitigated anarchy where every separate faction is scrambling to save its own skin. We are witnessing a total breakdown of command, and to put it plainly, the clock is ticking down. The inevitable end of the line is coming into sharp focus for Khamenei as his options completely run out. This brings us to the ultimate question, and I want to know where you stand on this developing situation. Just how close are we to the tipping point? When do you predict the regime in Tehran will finally buckle and collapse under its own weight? Moreover, are we watching history repeat itself with Khamenei destined to suffer the exact same fate as the Shah, effectively mirroring that dramatic fall from power? Make sure you keep it locked right here for the unfiltered truth and the most in-depth geopolitical analysis available anywhere as we continue to monitor this crisis around the clock.